This video has been designed for students who missed gas lab number 2 and need to make it up. The question for this lab is what happens when yeast and hydrogen peroxide are combined? The yeast in this lab is a catalyst. Write your hypothesis now. The materials we're using for this lab are a 250 milliliter flask, a rubber stopper, 3% hydrogen peroxide, we're going to use 25 milliliters of that, yeast, about a teaspoon, wooden splints, and matches. I've already pre-measured 25 milliliters of hydrogen peroxide. It's in the graduated cylinder. The lab asks you to make some observations of the hydrogen peroxide as far as color, odor, state of matter, texture, and then other observations. For color, it's basically clear. It's obviously a liquid. Hydrogen peroxide has no odor. Texture, not applicable here. We can just put Na for texture. And if there are any other observations you can make about it, please write those down. For the yeast, basically we're using active dry yeast. This is the Red Star brand. I have a teaspoon of it here, already pre-measured. Color is sort of a light brown or tan. The odor, well, many students in class described it as having the smell of bread. Very light, earthy smell. State of matter, it's obviously a solid. Texture, kind of grainy. And if there are other observations you can make, please write those down now. But this is the yeast. Now the lab will ask you to make some observations for during the reaction and after the reaction. I'll try to describe a few of those things as they're going on here shortly. And then we're going to do splint test observations because we are going to test this gas with a wooden splint, with the ember from a wooden splint, just as we did the gas we created in gas lab number 1. Okay, so we'll go ahead and start. I'm going to take the yeast and we're going to pour it right into the hydrogen peroxide. I'm going to swirl it around just about 3 times. And I'm going to loosely place the cap or the rubber stopper on the flask. So the reaction's taking place now. Color of the yeast is pretty much about the same, sort of a light brown or tan. What about the temperature? This reaction is slightly exothermic, so just a little bit warm, not a whole lot. There is no precipitate that forms in this reaction. And then if there are other observations you can, other things you notice, please write those down. Okay, and now for the splint test. I'm going to turn the lights out. What we're going to do is light a wooden splint. I'm going to blow out the flame so that only an ember is there. And we're going to insert the ember from the splint into the flask and we want to make observations regarding how that ember behaves. Does the ember go out? Does it glow brighter? Does it reignite? And record that in your lab. Okay. I'm going to blow out the flame. So we have a glowing ember. And the ember now goes inside. Okay, so what we notice is that when the ember goes into the flask and it's surrounded by the gas that has been created from the reaction, it reignites. We'll try it again. This is quite a different reaction from what we observed with gas lab number 1. With gas lab 1, when we put the ember inside with the gas, the ember actually went out. But here we get something very different. The ember actually reignites. So in your lab, for splint test observations, please record as many observations as you can. Specifically, how does the splint react when slowly inserted into the flask? How does the splint react when it's slowly removed from the flask? And then any other observations. Please complete the questions 1 through 4 for gas lab number 2. This concludes this demonstration.